Most people think the end of a relationship is loud. They picture screaming, doors slamming, arguments that last until 2 in the morning. They imagine tears, anger, one last dramatic goodbye. But real endings rarely look like that. Most of the time, they arrive quietly. Think about the last relationship that truly changed your life. Maybe it was a partner, close friend, even someone in your own family. If you replay the final weeks in your mind, you'll probably notice something surprising. The biggest warning wasn't another argument. It was the absence of one. One day, they simply stopped bringing things up. They stopped asking questions, stopped complaining, stopped trying to fix what was broken. And strangely enough, that silence almost felt like peace, until you realized it wasn't peace at all. It was distance. Here's something relationship psychologists have known for years. People rarely leave a relationship the day they walk away. Most leave emotionally, weeks, months, sometimes even years before they physically leave. By the time they finally say, "I think we're done," their decision has usually been growing in silence for a very long time. That's why breakups often feel completely different for each person. One person feels shocked. The other feels relieved. One says, "I never saw it coming." The other thinks, "I've been gone for months." So why does this happen? Why do people suddenly stop fighting? Why do they become quieter, calmer, almost strangely polite? And why is that often a much worse sign than anger? To understand that, we first need to understand something uncomfortable about human relationships. Conflict is not the opposite of love. Indifference is. That sounds backwards. Most of us grow up believing that arguments are dangerous. And yes, constant conflict can absolutely destroy a relationship. But conflict also tells us something important. It tells us that someone still cares enough to try. Imagine two couples. The first argues because one partner keeps coming home late. "Why didn't you text me? I was worried. You could have at least called." It's messy. It's emotional. Nobody enjoys it. But underneath those words is another message. "I still want to feel close to you." Now imagine the second couple. The same situation happens. Someone comes home hours late. No text. No explanation. The other person barely looks up. "Oh, you're home." Then they go back to whatever they were doing. No questions. No disappointment. No frustration. Just nothing. At first glance, that looks healthier. No fighting. No drama. No tension. But sometimes, that quiet isn't acceptance. It's surrender. There's a psychological concept known as learned helplessness. Originally, it described what happens when people experience the same negative outcome over and over until they stop trying to change it. Eventually, they don't fight anymore. Not because the situation improved, because they no longer believe anything they do will matter. Relationships can fall into the same pattern. Someone asks for more communication. Nothing changes. They ask again. Still nothing. They explain how they feel. They're ignored. Eventually, they stop asking. Not because they stopped caring, because hope became too expensive. At that point, silence becomes a form of self-protection. Every argument costs emotional energy. Every disappointment hurts. And after enough disappointment, the brain starts asking a different question. Not, "How do I fix this?" but, "Why am I still trying?" That shift changes everything. The relationship may look calmer from the outside, but internally, one person has already started letting go. This is why people are often confused when their partner suddenly leaves. There weren't even any arguments. Exactly, there weren't. The fighting ended long before the relationship did. Because fighting requires hope. You only argue with someone if you still believe your words might change something. Once that belief disappears, the arguments disappear too. And that's when silence becomes dangerous. Not because silence itself is bad. Silence can be peaceful. Silence can heal. Silence can even bring two people closer. But there's another kind of silence. The kind that slowly removes someone from your emotional world. Not with one dramatic decision, but with hundreds of tiny moments. Moments where they decide, it's easier not to say anything. And those moments are almost impossible to notice, unless you know what to look for. The first sign isn't that they stop talking. It's that they stop inviting you into their inner world. And that changes the relationship in ways most people don't recognize. Until it's already too late. At first, it's almost impossible to notice. Nothing dramatic changes. They still answer your texts. They still ask how your day was. They still sit across from you at dinner. From the outside, everything looks normal. But if you pay close attention, something important has disappeared. You, not physically, emotionally. Think about the people you're closest to. How often do they tell you completely unimportant things? Maybe they send you a photo of a funny dog they saw on the way to work. Maybe they complain about a coworker. Maybe they tell you about a movie they watched. Or they call just to say, "You won't believe what happened today." None of those conversations are necessary. That's exactly why they matter. Psychologists sometimes call these bids for connection. Tiny moments where someone says, "I want you inside my world." Healthy relationships aren't built on grand romantic gestures. They're built on thousands of tiny invitations. Look at this. Listen to this. Guess what happened? What do you think? Each one says the same thing. "I want to share this moment with you." Now imagine those invitations slowly disappearing, one by one. You ask, "How was work?" "It was fine." "What happened?" "Nothing." "Everything okay?" "Yeah." The conversation ends. Not because they're angry, because they no longer feel the need to let you in. That's one of the quietest signs someone is emotionally checking out. It's not that they have nothing to say. They're simply saying it to someone else. Maybe a coworker, a sibling, a friend, or sometimes no one at all. They've started carrying their emotional world by themselves. And once that happens, the relationship begins changing in ways neither person fully understands. Imagine something amazing happens. You get promoted. You finally finish a project you've worked on for months. You see something beautiful during your drive home. Who's the first person you want to tell? That answer says a lot about your emotional priorities. When relationships are healthy, partners naturally become each other's first call. Not because they have to, because sharing joy multiplies it. Sharing pain makes it lighter. But when someone has emotionally withdrawn, that instinct disappears. Good news stays inside. Bad news stays inside. Their inner life slowly becomes private. And privacy gradually becomes isolation. Here's something many people misunderstand. They think emotional distance begins with rejection. More often, it begins with disappointment. Disappointment repeated often enough eventually becomes emotional fatigue. Picture someone knocking on a door. The first time, they knock with hope. The second time, they knock a little softer. The third time, they hesitate. Eventually, they stop knocking altogether. Not because they stopped wanting the door to open, because they stopped believing anyone was on the other side. Relationships work the same way. Someone asks to be heard. Ignored. They ask again. Misunderstood. Eventually, they decide silence hurts less than disappointment. That's when something else begins to change. Their kindness. This surprises a lot of people. Most assume emotional distance makes people colder. Sometimes, it does the exact opposite. They become incredibly polite. Almost too polite. "Whatever you want. I'm okay with anything. Don't worry about it. No, it's fine." At first, this feels like progress. You think, "Wow, we haven't argued in weeks." But then something feels off. The warmth is gone. The playfulness disappears. The little disagreements that once made the relationship feel alive vanish. Instead of intimacy, everything starts feeling strangely professional, like you're talking to someone at work, or a neighbor you've known for years, but never really knew. Why does this happen? Because emotional distance creates emotional caution. They're no longer trying to build closeness. They're trying to avoid friction. The less emotionally invested someone becomes, the less willing they are to risk conflict. Conflict requires vulnerability. Distance does not. This is why emotionally detached people often sound incredibly reasonable. They're no longer fighting because, in their mind, the relationship has already become smaller. And smaller relationships require less emotional investment. There's another subtle shift almost nobody notices. The word "we" quietly disappears. Listen carefully to the language people use. Healthy couples naturally speak in shared language. "We should go there someday." "We've been thinking about moving." "We need a vacation." Future plans are built together. Even tiny ones. "What should we cook tonight?" But emotional withdrawal slowly changes the grammar of a relationship. "We" becomes "I," becomes "mine." Future conversations become strangely vague. "We'll see." "I don't know." "Maybe." the future itself starts disappearing. Not because they're uncertain, because they've quietly stopped imagining you inside it. This doesn't happen overnight. It's usually so gradual that neither person notices. One conversation, one weekend, one canceled plan at a time, until eventually, you're no longer building a future together. You're simply living beside each other. And perhaps the saddest part is this. Most couples' dawns happening. They recognize it in hindsight, after the breakup, after someone moves out, after the silence finally receives a name. Looking back, they remember all the moments that seemed insignificant, the short answers, the missing stories, the empty conversations, the strange politeness, the absence of we. Each one felt harmless by itself. Together, they were the relationship slowly fading away. But there is one final stage. The stage where silence stops being a reaction and becomes preparation. Because once someone reaches that point, their body often reveals what their words never will. And that's where the final signs become almost impossible to ignore. There is one final shift that happens before many relationships end. And once you notice it, it's incredibly difficult to unsee. It isn't something they say. It's something they stop imagining. The future. Think about the beginning of almost any relationship. People naturally talk about tomorrow. What should we do this weekend? We should visit that place. We need to watch that movie. Even if the plans never happen, they still matter, because every future plan sends the same message. I still see you in my life. That's why one of the quietest signs of emotional withdrawal is the disappearance of the future itself. Listen carefully, not just to what they say, to what they no longer say. The conversations become strangely short. What are you doing next month? I don't know. Want to plan something? We'll see. What about our vacation? Maybe. The words sound harmless, but emotionally, something has shifted. They've stopped building a future that automatically includes you. And here's the painful part. Most people don't notice it, because nothing dramatic happens. There isn't one big conversation. There isn't one unforgettable argument. It's just less excitement, less curiosity, less planning, less we. Until one day, there is no we left at all. This is often the stage where people begin preparing for a life that doesn't include the relationship. Sometimes they reconnect with old friends. Sometimes they throw themselves into work. Sometimes they become unusually independent. They make decisions without asking for your opinion. They create routines that no longer revolve around you. From the outside, it looks like personal growth. And sometimes, it is. But sometimes, it's emotional preparation. Their life is slowly learning how to function without your presence. One small adjustment at a time. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part is this. The partner who still feels connected usually notices these changes, but explains them away. They've just been busy. They're stressed. They've had a lot on their mind. And those explanations may even be true. Life gets busy. People get tired. Stress changes all of us. That's important to remember something. None of these signs on their own prove that a relationship is over. A quiet week doesn't mean someone has emotionally left. Neither does needing space. Healthy relationships sometimes include silence. Healthy people sometimes become withdrawn. The difference isn't the silence itself. It's what the silence is protecting. Is it protecting peace? Or is it protecting distance? That's the question. Because silence has two completely different meanings. One kind says, I need a little time so I can come back. The other says, I'm already gone. And from the outside, they can look almost identical. So how do you tell the difference? Not by counting how many words someone speaks. Not by watching every text message. Not by searching for secret clues. You look at direction. Are they moving back toward the relationship? Or away from it? Do difficult conversations eventually happen? Or are they avoided forever? Do moments of distance eventually lead to reconnection? Or to even more distance? Healthy relationships bend. They stretch. Sometimes they even break a little. But eventually, both people move back toward each other. Emotionally detached relationships do the opposite. Every week creates just a little more space, until that space begins feeling normal. This is where many people make one final mistake. They panic. They sense the distance, and they try to erase it overnight. More texts, more calls, long emotional conversations, constant reassurance. Do you still love me? Are we okay? Please just tell me what's wrong. Those reactions are completely understandable. When we feel someone slipping away, our instinct is to pull harder. But emotionally, people rarely reconnect because they feel cornered. Real connection begins when both people feel safe enough to be honest. Sometimes that honesty repairs the relationship. Sometimes it reveals that the relationship has already ended. Both outcomes are painful, but only one gives you clarity. If someone has truly checked out emotionally, no perfect sentence will suddenly bring them back. Love doesn't disappear because of one bad conversation, and it usually doesn't return because of one good one. Relationships slowly become stronger, and they usually become weaker the same way. One interaction at a time, one disappointment at a time, one silence at a time. So if this video leaves you with one thought, let it be this: don't wait until the silence becomes permanent. Pay attention while people are still trying, while they're still complaining, still asking questions, still telling you that something hurts. Because those moments, as uncomfortable as they may be, are often signs that hope is still alive. People who have completely given up rarely spend much energy explaining why they're hurting. They simply stop inviting you into that part of themselves. And that may be the quietest heartbreak of all. Not when someone leaves your life, but when they slowly stop letting you into theirs. So if someone you love has become unusually quiet, don't ask, "Why aren't you talking?" Try asking a different question. "When was the last time you felt truly heard by me?" That one question won't save every relationship. Nothing can. But it might open a door before silence quietly closes it forever. Because relationships almost never end in a single moment. They end in the moments we stopped believing our words would make a difference. And by the time the goodbye finally comes, it usually isn't the beginning of the ending. It's simply the first time the silence speaks out loud.